Okay, there we go. Good afternoon, basketball and hockey fans. Big Al here on this Monday, 13th, 2023, and this is the first of weekly standings checks in both the NBA and the NHL. We'll also look at the games that will be taking place over the coming week in both leagues. So with that, let's start off with the current NBA standings through November 12th, starting in the Eastern Conference, where the Philadelphia 76ers owns the conference's best record at 8-1, sitting atop the Atlantic Division. 8-1 in their last 10 games, including 8 straight wins that are probably the hottest team in the NBA right now. In second place are the Boston Celtics at 7-2, one game back, 7-2 in their last 10, including 2 straight wins. In third, you've got the New York Knicks at 5-4, 3 games back, 5-4 their last 10 games. Well, they haven't played 10, and 3 straight wins. Fourth place, the Brooklyn Nets, 5-5, 3.5 games out behind the Sixers. 5-5 in their last 10 games, including a win in their last game. And sitting last in the Atlantic are the Toronto Raptors at 4-5, 4 games already behind Philly, 4-5 in their last 10, including a loss in their most recent game. Moving on to the Central Division, it's led by the Indiana Pacers at 6-4, and they've lost their most recent game. A close second are the Milwaukee Bucks at 5-4, just a half game out, and 2 losses in a row for them. In third place, the Cleveland Cavaliers, 4-5, 1.5 games out. They won their last game. Fourth place are the Chicago Bulls at 4-6, 2 games out behind Indiana, 4-6 in their last 10, including a win in their most recent game. Now, we talked about the Sixers being the hottest team in the NBA. This is probably the opposite of that, and that's the Detroit Pistons. 2-9 already, 4.5 games behind the Pacers. 2-8 in their last 10 games, including 8 straight losses. Ouch. The Miami Heat sit atop the Southeast Division at 6-4, 5 straight wins, while both the Atlanta Hawks and Orlando Magic are tied for second place, both sitting 5-4, half game behind the Heat. The Hawks lost their last game, while the Magic won their last game. The Charlotte Hornets are in fourth place at 3-6, 2.5 games behind Miami, and a loss in their last game. And sitting last are the Washington Wizards at 2-7, 3.5 games out behind the Heat, and 2 straight losses. Jumping over to the Western Conference, the Dallas Mavericks sit atop the Southeast Division at 8-2, or rather the Southwest Division at 8-2, and 2 straight wins. Then you've got the red-hot Houston Rockets at 6-3, 1.5 games behind the Mavs, and 6 straight wins. Third place are the New Orleans Pelicans at 4-6, 4 games out of first behind Dallas. And in fourth place, the San Antonio Spurs at 3-7 and 5 games behind Dallas. Both teams have lost 5 games in a row. And in last place, the Memphis Grizzlies at 2-8, 6 games behind the Dallas Mavs, and a win in their last game. The defending NBA champion Denver Nuggets sit atop the Northwest at 8-2. They lost their most recent game. Next, the streaking Minnesota Timberwolves at 7-2, just a half game out. They've won 6 in a row. The Oklahoma City Thunder sits in third place at 6-4, 2 games behind Denver, and they've won their last game. 4th place are the Portland Trailblazers at 3-6, 4.5 games behind the Nuggets, and 3 straight losses. Last place, the Utah Jazz at 3-7, trailing Denver by 5 games. They won their last game. Now we're jumping over to the Pacific Division, led by the Golden State Warriors at 6-5. However, they have dropped 3 straight games. Then there's a virtual tie for second place with both the Sacramento Kings at 4-4 and the Los Angeles Lakers at 5-5. Both teams are a half game behind the Warriors, and both teams have won 2 straight. In 4th place, a team that many picked to be a title contender this year is the Phoenix Suns, 4-6 to start the season, 1.5 games behind the Warriors, 2 straight losses. And in last place, the LA Clippers at 3-6, 2 games behind Golden State, and they've dropped 5 games in a row. All right, as far as the playoffs, and yeah, I know it's only mid-November. It's too early to talk playoffs, but it's fun. And then, all right, the Sixers are the top seed in the East with an 8-1 record. Then it's the Celtics at 7-2. The Pacers and Heat are 3rd and 4th respectively at 6-4. Then you have 4 teams with 5-4 records. The Heat at number 5, Magic at 6, Knicks at 7, and the Bucks at 8. And in Brooklyn, the Nets at 5-5 sit in the 9th spot, and the Cleveland Cavaliers at 4-5 was in that 10th and final spot. So the top 6 in each conference would make the playoffs. That means Philly, Boston, Indiana, Miami, Atlanta, and Orlando would clinch playoff berths, while New York, Milwaukee, Brooklyn, and Cleveland would claim the 4 play-in tournament spots. Outside the playoffs, you've got Toronto at 4-5, sitting 11th, Chicago 4-6 and 12th. In 13th, you've got Charlotte at 3-6. 14th is Washington at 2-7, and 15th is Detroit at 2-9. Meanwhile, out west, the top 6 teams that would make the playoffs would be Denver at 8-2, Dallas at 8-2. They're the top 2. 3rd is Minnesota at 7-2. 4th is Houston, believe it or not, at 6-3. 5 is Oklahoma City at 6-4, and number 6 would be Golden State at 6-5. The 4 teams that would make the play-in tournament at the present time would be Sacramento at 4-4 in the number 7 spot, the LA Lakers at 5-5 in the number 8 spot. Number 9 would be Phoenix at 4-6. And number 10 would be New Orleans, also 4-6. Outside the playoffs, you would have the LA Clippers at number 11 with a 3-6 record. Portland at number 12 with the same 3-6 record. Then you've got the San Antonio Spurs sitting 13th at 3-7. 14th would be Utah at 3-7. And 15th would be Memphis at 2-8. All right, now taking a look at the upcoming week in the association, we've got 4 games tonight. The New York Knicks visit the Boston Celtics at 7:30 Eastern Time. At the same time, the Washington Wizards battle the Toronto Raptors. At 8 p.m. Eastern, it's the Chicago Bulls at the Milwaukee Bucks. And at 10 p.m., you've got the Cleveland Cavaliers out west against the Sacramento Kings. You got a bit of a busy night on Tuesday. the Atlanta Hawks and Detroit Pistons, the Indiana Pacers and the Philadelphia 76ers, and the Miami Heat and Charlotte Hornets all play at 7 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. Then you've got the Orlando Magic visiting the Brooklyn Nets and the San Antonio Spurs at the Oklahoma City Thunder, both games at 7:30 Eastern. The Dallas Mavericks and New Orleans Pelicans will meet in the Crescent at 8 p.m. Eastern, followed by the Portland Trailblazers and Utah Jazz at 9 p.m. Eastern. Then it's the LA Clippers and Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves at the Golden State Warriors, both at 10 p.m. Eastern. And then at 10:30, you've got the Memphis Grizzlies and the LA Lakers. Moving to the Wednesday schedule. All right, we got another busy night. The Dallas Mavericks are in D.C. to face the Wizards at 7 p.m. Eastern. The Knicks and Hawks will square off in Atlanta at 7:30. Then it's the Celtics-Sixers rematch in Philadelphia, also at 7:30 on Wednesday night. The Milwaukee Bucks travel north of the border to face the Toronto Raptors at 7:30 Eastern. Then at 8 p.m. Eastern, it's the Orlando Magic at the Chicago Bulls. 9 p.m. Eastern, the Phoenix Suns welcome the Minnesota Timberwolves. Then 2 games at 10 p.m. The Sacramento Kings at the LA Lakers and the Cleveland Cavaliers continuing their West Coast trip in Portland against the Trailblazers. Only 2 games on the schedule on Thursday night. The Brooklyn Nets at the Miami Heat at 7:30 and the Oklahoma City Thunder at the Golden State Warriors at 10 p.m. Eastern. Then on Friday, the New York Knicks face off with the Wizards in D.C. at 7 p.m. Eastern, followed by the Milwaukee Bucks and Charlotte Hornets at that same time. Then you've got 4 games at 7:30 Eastern time. The Philadelphia 76ers in Atlanta against the Hawks. The Detroit Pistons visit the Cavaliers in Cleveland. The Sacramento Kings battle the San Antonio Spurs in San Antonio. And the Boston Celtics at the Toronto Raptors. All 4 of those games start at 7:30 Eastern time. At 8 p.m. Eastern time, it's the Denver Nuggets at the New Orleans Pelicans and the Orlando Magic at the Chicago Bulls. Then a couple hours after that, at 10 p.m. Eastern time, the LA Lakers visit the Portland Trailblazers and the Phoenix Suns head up to Salt Lake to battle the Utah Jazz. And the final game of the night on Friday is at 10:30 Eastern with the Los Angeles Clippers hosting the red-hot Houston Rockets. That brings us to Saturday, where you've got the New York Knicks in Charlotte against the Hornets at 6 p.m. Eastern time. New Orleans Pelicans hosting the Minnesota Timberwolves at 7. Then you have the Miami Heat at the Chicago Bulls, the Dallas Mavericks at the Milwaukee Bucks, and the Memphis Grizzlies at the San Antonio Spurs, all starting at 8 p.m. Eastern on Saturday night. And the final game on Saturday is the Oklahoma City Thunder at the Golden State Warriors at 8:30 Eastern time. And finally on Sunday, got a few matinee games, including the Philadelphia 76ers at the Brooklyn Nets at 3 p.m. Eastern, the Detroit Pistons at the Toronto Raptors at 4 p.m. Eastern. And then in the early evening, the Indiana Pacers host the Orlando Magic at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Denver Nuggets visit the Cleveland Cavaliers at 6. Then it's the Sacramento Kings at the Dallas Mavericks at 7:30. The Phoenix Suns and the Utah Jazz win battle in Salt Lake once again. That's at 8 p.m. Eastern. So is the Boston Celtics and Memphis Grizzlies. At 9 p.m. Eastern, it's the Portland Trailblazers hosting the Oklahoma City Thunder. And the final game of the night on Sunday is the Houston Rockets at the LA Lakers at 9:30 Eastern Time. So that is a look at the NBA standings and the schedule for the coming week. Now let's jump on over to the National Hockey League. We'll look at the standings through Sunday first. Starting in the Eastern Conference, the Boston Bruins sit with a record of 11-1-2 through 14 games. That's 24 points and 10 wins in regulation or overtime. Moving into second place are the Florida Panthers. 14 games played, 9-4-1, 19 points, all 9 wins in regulation or overtime. In a tie for third are the Detroit Red Wings and Toronto Maple Leafs. Both played 15 games. Both have records of 8-5-2. Both sit with 18 points. Detroit has 8 wins in regulation and overtime, while Toronto has 6. Tied for fifth place, you've got the Tampa Bay Lightning. 15 games played, 6-5-4, 16 points, and 6 wins in regulation and overtime. They are tied with the Montreal Canadiens, who also won 15 games or played 15 games. They are 7-6-2 with 16 points, and they also have 6 wins in regulation or overtime. The Buffalo Sabres are in 7th place, 15 games played, 7-7-1, 15 points. That's like a point a game, and all 7 wins coming in overtime. And the Ottawa Senators are bringing up the rear in the Atlantic. 13 games played, 6-7 record, 12 points, 6 wins in regulation or overtime. The New York Rangers on top in the Metropolitan Division, 14 games played, 11-2-1, 23 points, 10 wins in regulation or overtime. In second place are the Carolina Hurricanes, 15 games played, 9-6. In third place, 13 games played, record is 7-4-2 for 16 points, 5 wins in regulation or overtime. Tied for fourth place are the New Jersey Devils and the Philadelphia Flyers. New Jersey's played 13 games. They're 7-5-1 with 7 wins in regulation and overtime. The Philadelphia Flyers played 15 games. They're 7-7-1, also with 7 wins in regulation or overtime, and both teams sit with 15 points. In sixth place are the Pittsburgh Penguins. 13 games played, 7-6, 14 points, 7 wins in regulation or overtime. In seventh place, the New York Islanders. 13 games played, 5-5-3, 13 points, 5 wins in regulation or overtime. And in the basement of the Metro Division, the Columbus Blue Jackets. 15 games played, 4-7-4, 12 points, 4 wins in regulation or overtime. And we'll look at the playoff standings shortly. Now we're going to jump over to the Western Conference, where the Central Division is led by the Dallas Stars. 14 games played, 10-3-1, 21 points, 9 wins in regulation or overtime. In a tie for second points-wise, you've got the Colorado Avalanche and the Winnipeg Jets. Colorado played 13 games. They have an 8-5 record, 7 wins in regulation and overtime. While the Winnipeg Jets have played 14 games, they're 7-5-2 with 7s in regulation and overtime. Both Colorado and Winnipeg with 16 points. So you got a tie for second place in terms of points. You also have a tie for fourth in this division in points with both the St. Louis Blues and Arizona Coyotes. St. Louis played 13 games. They have a record of 7-5-1 with 6 wins in regulation or overtime. While Arizona has played 14 games, they're 7-6-1 with 5 wins in regulation or overtime, both teams sitting with 15 points. In sixth place are the Minnesota Wild. 15 games played, 5-8-2, 12 points, 4 wins in regulation or overtime. And points-wise, tied for the basement in the Central are both the Chicago Blackhawks and Nashville Predators. Chicago played 13 games. They have a record of 5-8 with 5 wins in regulation and overtime. Nashville played 14 games. They have a record of 5-9, and they also have 5 wins in regulation or overtime. Both teams have 10 points. Jumping over to the Pacific Division, where half the teams are good and the other half not so much. The Vegas Golden Knights lead the Pacific Division with the NHL's best record. 15 games played, 12-1 record, 25 points, 9 wins in regulation or overtime. In second place, you've got the Vancouver Canucks. 15 games played, 11-3-1, 23 points, and an NHL leading 11 wins in regulation or overtime. And in third place, you've got the Los Angeles Kings. 14 games played, 8-3-3, 19 points, 8 wins in regulation or overtime. Sitting in fourth place are the Anaheim Ducks. 14 games played, 8-6 record, 16 points, all 8 wins coming in regulation or overtime. Then we get to the bottom half of this division, which is just bad. Starting with the fifth place Seattle Kraken. 15 games played, 5-7-3, 13 points, 5 wins in regulation or overtime. Then in sixth and seventh place, you have 2 Alberta-based teams, starting with the Calgary Flames in sixth place. 14 games played, 4-8-2, 10 points, 4 wins in regulation or overtime. In seventh place, you've got the Edmonton Oilers. 13 games played, 3-9-1, 7 points, 3 wins in regulation or overtime. And sitting with the worst record in all of hockey, the San Jose Sharks. 15 games played, 2-12-1 for 5 points and 2 wins in regulation and overtime. Looking at the playoffs, if the season ended right now, Boston, Florida, and Detroit would make the playoffs in the Atlantic Division. They would be your top 3. The top 3 in the Metropolitan Division would be the New York Rangers, Carolina Hurricanes, and Washington Capitals. Meanwhile, out west, the top 3 teams in the Central would be Colorado, and Winnipeg. And the top Pacific would be Vegas, Vancouver, and Los Angeles. Okay, looking at the wild cards. The wild card teams in the Eastern Conference would be the Toronto Maple Leafs with 18 points. And the Tampa Bay Lightning with 16 points. Montreal has 16 points, but they would just miss out on the playoffs. The New Jersey Devils, Philadelphia Flyers, and Buffalo Sabres would each be 1 point out. The Pittsburgh Penguins would be 2 points out. The New York Islanders would be 3 points out, while the Ottawa Senators and Columbus Blue Jackets would each be 4 points out. And in the Western Conference, the Anaheim Ducks with 16 points and the St. Louis Blues with 15 points would be the 2 wild card teams. Arizona also has 15 points, but they will lose the tiebreaker because of that one loss. Seattle at the present time would be 2 points out. Minnesota 2 points out. Chicago, Nashville, and Calgary all 5 points out. Edmonton 8 points out, and San Jose already 10 points out. All right, so what's happening this week in the NHL? Let's take a look. 2 games on the schedule tonight. The New York Islanders at the Edmonton Oilers. That game is at 8:30 Eastern Time. And then the Seattle Kraken hosting the Colorado Avalanche in Seattle at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And this is a revenge spot for Colorado. Because remember, the Kraken went into Denver last week and beat down the Avalanche. This is a return game from that matchup. Okay, moving Tuesday. You got the Boston Bruins at the Buffalo Sabres, the Calgary Flames and the Montreal Canadiens, the Vegas Golden Knights and the Washington Capitals, and the Pittsburgh Penguins visiting the Columbus Blue Jackets. All 4 of those games will face off at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Then you've got 4 more games at 8. The Arizona Coyotes at the Dallas Stars, the Tampa Bay Lightning at the St. Louis Blues, the Anaheim Ducks at the Nashville Predators, and the New Jersey Devils visiting the Winnipeg Jets. All 4 of those games are at 8 p.m. Eastern. And then at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, the San Jose Sharks host the Florida Panthers. Only 4 games on the schedule for Wednesday. The Philadelphia Flyers visit the Carolina Hurricanes at 7:30. Then it's the Seattle Kraken in Edmonton against the Oilers at 8:30. The Colorado Avalanche will host the Anaheim Ducks at 9 p.m. Eastern. And then the New York Islanders out west taking on the Vancouver Canucks at 10 p.m. Eastern. Jump into Thursday. We have a matinee game. The Detroit Red Wings at the Ottawa Senators. That's at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And then the rest of the games are at night. The Golden Knights visit Montreal at 7 p.m. Eastern. The Pittsburgh Penguins host the New Jersey Devils. And the Arizona Columbus against Blue Jackets. Those 2 games also starting at 8 p.m., the Tampa Bay Lightning in Chicago. Then at 7 p.m., or rather 9 p.m. Eastern, the Calgary Flames host the Vancouver Canucks. At 10 p.m. Eastern, the New York Islanders continue their West Coast trip in Seattle against the Kraken. That's at 10 o'clock Eastern. And then at 10:30, final game of the night, the LA Kings hosting the Florida Panthers. Only 3 games on the schedule for Friday. The Red Wings will host the Toronto Maple Leafs in another matinee game at 2 p.m. Eastern. And then hours later, it's the Buffalo Sabres at the Winnipeg Jets at 8. And the Florida Panthers and Anaheim Ducks at 10. Busy Saturday. How about this game? The Ottawa Senators will host the Montreal Canadiens at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Then at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, it's the Vegas Golden Knights at the Philadelphia Flyers. An hour later at 2 p.m. Eastern, the Chicago Blackhawks visit the Nashville Predators. At 4 p.m. Eastern, the Tampa Bay Lightning host the Edmonton Oilers. You got the Montreal Canadiens and Boston Bruins You got the Montreal Canadiens and the Boston Bruins in an original 6 matchup. That's at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's one of 5 games starting at that time. The others are the Islanders and Flames from Calgary, the Penguins and Hurricanes from Raleigh, the New York Rangers and the New Jersey Devils, and the Arizona Coyotes visiting their old stomping grounds in Winnipeg to face the Jets. All 5 of those games will start at 7 p.m. Eastern. Then at 7:30, you've got the Washington Capitals hosting the Columbus Blue Jackets. And then you got your late games. At 9 p.m. Eastern, the Dallas Stars are home against the Colorado Avalanche. Big matchup in the Western Conference. Then at 10 p.m. Eastern, it's the Seattle Kraken north of the border against the Vancouver Canucks. And at 10:30, the LA Kings will host the St. Louis Blues. And finally, on Sunday, you got 5 games on the schedule. How about this one? The Toronto Maple Leafs and the Minnesota Wild will play at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. And they're playing this game in Stockholm. So a little Sunday morning hockey for you there. 8 a.m. Eastern for the Leafs and Wild. Then it's the Flyers hosting the Blue Jackets at 5:30 Eastern. The Vegas Golden Knights entering the Igloo to face the Penguins at 6 p.m. Eastern. The Buffalo Sabres in the Windy City against the Chicago Blackhawks at 7 Eastern. And the last game of the night is the St. Louis Blues and Anaheim Ducks from the Honda Center at 8 p.m. Eastern. Okay, that is a look at the updated NBA and NHL standings through November 12th and a look at all the games from the coming week in both leagues. Join me tomorrow night. We'll unveil the 3rd college football playoff rankings of the season, and we'll also look at the Week 12 college football television schedule. That's dropping tomorrow. Until then, comment and subscribe to my channel, ring the bell, and get notified every time I go live. Big Al signing off. Thanks for watching, and keep pounding, my friends. Keep pounding. Peace out.